Are you wondering if life holds any purpose or meaning for you anymore? Maybe you're just exhausted after years of caregiving, chronic stress, and emotional overload. This episode is definitely for you. We're talking to Kathleen Greer, and she's sharing her story of how she faced her own childhood trauma while raising 7 children, 4 of whom were adopted. How she faced and overcame the guilt that she felt on the minute she decided to invest in herself, and how it feels to find your purpose later in life. Do you want to achieve your goals, but anxiety is tripping you up? Like to keep those fun weekend plans, but depression has you counseling again? Hey, I'm Lori, dog mom, lover of nature, and hygge enthusiast. Positive psychology skills help me overcome chronic severe PTSD. If you're ready to learn how to overcome your anxiety and depression and rediscover happiness and purpose in life, then get your cozy on and let's get started. Welcome back to Practical Solutions for PTSD. I'm going to keep my part of this really short because we have an amazing interview today and I want to get to that right away. But I did want to give you this reminder. If you would like to become part of the insiders for this podcast, just go to insider.grwebsite.com. Just your name and email, that's all it is. I promise I will never spam you. But you will get some additional benefits for being an insider of the podcast. You get exclusive offers that I give only to my insider group. You'll have weekly encouragement via the Practical Solutions weekly newsletter and some behind the mic information. So it's just pulling back the curtain a little bit and letting you see some things that go on behind the scenes that nobody else gets. So just go to insider.grwebsite.com to sign up today. I'm excited to bring you this interview I had with Kathleen Greer. She's just an incredible woman, and by the time I was done with the interview, I felt like I had made a new friend. She's a Christian author of clean fiction and nonfiction. She's a trauma-informed educator and the host of the Novel Writing for Christians podcast. She helps aspiring writers, especially women over 50, write compelling, faith-aligned fiction with believable, emotionally layered characters. Kathleen believes that your story matters, and through her books, podcasts, and writing resources, she equips Christian writers to finally start and finish the story God has placed on their heart. So please join me for this incredible conversation. So Kathleen, I am super excited to have you here. I have some writers in the audience, so I know they're going to be excited to hear from an author who is published. Some writers are not published, others are. So they're going to really resonate with you. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then obviously you have some trauma in your background we're going to talk about here in a minute. But before we get into that, I want to give you just a couple minutes to introduce yourself to the audience, tell them a little bit about what you do and what brings you here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And a little bit, I want to give you my story in a nutshell before I tell you what I do now. My story in a nutshell is I experienced childhood trauma and then ignored it and grew up, got married, had 3 kids, adopted a sibling group of 4 who all had their own trauma. So what happened was their trauma was triggering my trauma responses, and I was triggering their trauma responses. So I finally had to get some help and healing for myself so
Yes.
that I could help them begin on their healing path, the ones that were willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started doing a lot of research. I became a trauma-informed trainer and started getting help for myself. And so that's where my story began. I pretty much ignored it for a long time and I couldn't anymore. But what I do now is I have a podcast, Novel Writing for Christians, where I help Christians who want to get their story out into the world and write the trauma realistically. That's why we connected, Lori. It's like I listened to your podcast and like, yeah, we're on the same wavelength. So that's what I do. I don't just talk about trauma. I talk about how to write it realistically, but I talk about all the other aspects of writing that you need to do to complete your novel from start to finish.
That's really awesome that you're able to guide people through that process. And reading through some of your bio ahead of time, I noticed that you focus especially on aspiring writers, but especially those over 50. And before we
Yes.
get into the more structured comments. I really like to dive into that one for just a little bit because so often when people, two things. One, when they hit, their late 40s, 50s, they feel like, I can't accomplish anything else in life. I've reached the end. It's just now just exist and die. That's
Yes.
exaggerating, but
No, it's
the other
not exaggerating.
the other thing is that when you've gone through trauma, and you come out of that, sometimes you wonder if you're any good for anyone. And if you can
Exactly.
really, like, I'm all spent up, I'm broken, I can't do anything anymore, which God can bring beautiful healing. One of my favorite scriptures is where he makes beauty for ashes. God can take
Yes.
the broken parts of ourselves and put them together in such a beautiful picture and use that for his glory. But I'd like for you to talk just a little bit about why you target people over 50 and what that can mean to someone who's looking at, can I really do anything right now? And maybe not writing, but just anything specifically.
Right, exactly. I target them because that was me. I
Oh, that's
homeschooled
cool.
my kids for 20 years. I didn't write my first book until later, like when I was getting to the tail end of homeschooling and graduating them all. But then when I became an empty nester, I'm like, okay, now what? I'm done. I don't have anything. Like my husband, I've told him this before, and this is true for a lot of people. Like his job just continues, it's still the same. Mine completely evaporated. Not that I don't have a relationship with my kids and now my grandkids, I do, but my job was like constant on mom, driver, taking kids to practices, swim teams, everything. That was me. Meal prep, cleaning, everything. And then all of a sudden, it's over.
Yeah.
I'm fixing food for two people. And now I went through that couple of years where I was like, there's nothing, I can't do anything anymore. I'm just gonna, like you said, exist until I die. And it wasn't until actually I hit 55 that I began to invest in myself because I always felt selfish.
Hmm.
Like I can't take a class. I can't get a writing mentor. I can't sign up for a course. Then I was like, you know what? I'm going to sign up for a writing mentor. I'm going to sign up for a course that's going to help me. I'm going to get a coach. And it was so scary. I felt so ashamed and guilty that I was actually spending money on myself. But now that I'm into that and I'm doing those things, I'm like, you know what? I want to help other women. Your life is not over when your kids leave the nest. And your life is not over when you hit 50 or 40. That's why I specifically target that age group because you know what? You can have a totally, God gives us different purposes for different seasons. So, whatever that is for you, whether it's writing or whether it's something else, God is going to open those doors if you will step through them willingly and you have a whole new purpose. And then you get honestly, you get new friends, you get new things that you're doing on a daily basis. And then when your kids are calling you, like, hey, mom, can you do some random thing? And well, maybe I can, but not today
Yeah.
because I'm doing what? You're doing something? And I remember when that really hit home, when I just started stepping out and doing some things. And one of my college age sons just showed up at my house and I wasn't home. And so he's calling me repeatedly, Mom, where are you? I showed up here and you're not here. Mom, why aren't you home? Like, I'm doing other things. So it is definitely something that we need to, as 50 somethings, 40 somethings, 60 somethings, 70 somethings, you know what? You can start something new.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I really love that. And I know I'm in my early 50s, so this is resonating in a lot of ways. And look, working with younger women in my church, I often tell them occasionally you'll run across someone who gets a calling from God early in their life, and that is just it for the rest of their life.
Right,
But from my experience, which obviously isn't the end all be all, but from my experience, that very rarely happens. You usually have seasons of life where
right.
this is where God wants you right here, and then you're going to move on, and this is where God wants you right here. And you have windows and seasons of your life. And often, I know for me, a lot of those early seasons prepared me for the one I'm in today.
Yes.
And I wouldn't have had the depth to be able to have this podcast, definitely not the experience. And so while, 20 years ago I was working with children, now I'm working with adults. And this is exactly where God wants me because this is
Right.
the season and the chapter he has for me. And I'm starting completely fresh and I'm in my early 50s. This is not a bad thing. This is a good thing. God has
Right.
purpose for us and we keep moving forward and fulfilling God's mission for us in whatever season we're in. So I'm so glad I asked you that question. And that's a beautiful answer. I really appreciate that. So let's go ahead and get on to what we're actually scheduled for this interview.
Okay.
Another thing we really want to hit on, and this is part of what you're going to talk about, is when we've had trauma, sometimes we feel like we're too broken to do anything in the future.
Yeah.
And yet God can use that pain. I tell my people a lot, and they're going to resonate with us that God can turn our pain into purpose. He has a
Yeah.
purpose for that pain and then turn it into a promise that he will fulfill in our lives. And you've lived this. So I want you to talk to us a little bit about how that childhood trauma that you experienced and the trauma with your children and learning all that, how you have used that to shape your writing career today.
Well, I tell people that when you've experienced trauma and you begin that healing arc, then that becomes your superpower of empathy.
Yes.
Like empathy is your superpower. And when I started healing from my own trauma while helping my kiddos at the same time, then I had so much empathy for them when they would have a reaction to something or they were triggered by some smell or sound or something that someone said. And the way that that's helped me as a writer is when I am creating a character, I can use all of those things I've learned about myself and about the science of how trauma affects people, and I put that in my writing. So if I'm writing a new character, I'm like, okay, we've got the brain, the biology, the behavior, the beliefs. I've got all of these things. It's called the 5 Bs. I probably missed one, but I can choose one of those and say, okay, let's work with this one for a while because I know how my behavior changed when I started healing from trauma. Like, okay, um, count before when you're triggered, count to 10, those kinds of things. Like, don't give in to the trigger, take a breath, let it pass, let your emotions ride the wave, and those kinds of things. Then I can use those in my writing
Mhm.
and creating characters. And here is the wonderful thing about that: I have readers that will reach out to me, one in particular who reached out to me about my agoraphobic character and said, you know what, I love this series so much. I don't struggle with agoraphobia. I don't struggle with some of the other things this character struggles with, but I just really related to her because she's so human. And I have my own struggles. And you wrote that into a character that made me feel seen. And that's what I want to do.
That's wonderful. I really like that. Making them realistic and something that I could be that person.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's what we want.
Change the names and the trauma experience and the symptoms, and it's me.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay, so many, and I've seen this in stories before. I love stories. I've not written really much of anything. I did a little bit for kids, but I read a lot and I listen to a lot. And you do have these where they go through this super traumatic experience and then they have a little bit around it that they're recovering, and then bammo, they're they gain superpowers and they're just amazing people and they go out and do great things. Where you try to make them realistic within your character. So how did your own personal experience help you to do that, to make those more realistic where it's not this idealized version of a person post-trauma?
Well, one of the ways that it's helped me to write those characters is realizing my own journey. Like, I didn't go to one counseling session and say, okay, check that off the list. I am now completely better. I never have to go back. We did all the work. I journaled. I did all of those things. So when I think about writing a character, I think about how sitting in that counseling session, I was triggered by something that we talked about and then given the homework like, hey, you're going to work on this one thing, but you're not going to be all better by next week. Like one of the assignments one of my counselors gave me was she wanted me to make this kind of vision board thing
Mm-hmm.
of what I thought God was or what he looked like or, how his character was revealed in my life. And oh my gosh, I think back, it was horrific what I did because my version of God was like God with this big sledgehammer, like, okay, Kathleen, you stepped out of line, get back in line. So I got a bunch of Lord of the Rings scenes and I had like Balrogs and fire. And it was like, it was scary, but I was so proud of it because I was like, this is my representation of God. And I took it in to my counselor and she took one look at it and she was like, "Oh, Kathleen, this is, we got some work to do." So I think about those experiences. What is my main character? How do they view God? How's this affected their belief system? How's it affected their relationships? Are they open to new relationships or are they shutting down every time someone reaches out to them? Or are they oversharing in relationships and then getting themselves in trouble because they just gave the villain, and this is for a book, not for real life,
Right.
their address and just been over friendly with someone? So I think of all of those things and I can add those to my characters.
Something you were talking about, you mentioned that, it's not like and I'm putting this in my words, you can't just like go for one counseling session, you're going to be better. I
Right.
can I can
Darn.
remember many times in my own journey that you think, oh, this is going to be the answer. Like, I'm going to do this. It's going
Mhm.
to solve all my problems. Only to
Yes.
find out it just peeled back another layer um,
Yes.
and revealed a whole nother, another bucket of worms that you had to deal with.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
how have you dealt with those emotions? How did you deal with it going through there? And then I'm assuming you insert this in your characters, which I know this isn't necessarily a writing podcast, but how do you process that when you realize, oh, this wasn't the answer? There's still a whole bunch more to work through.
Well, first of all, when you find out that's not the answer, you cry. No, you do. You're going to have a reaction because honestly, I went so many. This is the answer. Like
Mhm.
nutrition is the answer. Exercise is the answer. A schedule is the answer. Controlling everybody and everything is the answer. And those are not good coping mechanisms. Some of them are healthy habits,
Mhm.
but I think that it is constantly a process to this day about what is the answer. There is not one answer, there is a variety of answers. And there are all of those things that I listed, like healthy eating, having a schedule, doing things at a certain time the same day every week, whether it's like I exercise first thing in the morning or I have Bible study first thing. Those are all things that help us feel safe because one of the things that is the biggest whenever you have experienced trauma is that you need that felt safety.
Right.
And there's a big difference between actual safety and felt safety. And I learned that with my kids and my responses to their triggers that were triggering me. I did not feel safe as a child at all. And I would try to explain to other people around me that when my child was having a reaction, it's because they didn't feel safe. And they would say, "Oh, but the door's locked. There's nobody scary here. There's nothing bad going on." Like, no, you don't understand. There's a deeper layer. So,
Right.
what you were talking about is like an onion. When you peel off one layer and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm doing a little bit better in this area," and then it's like, you cry when you cut up onions, right? So
Mhm.
there's going to be some grief you're going to have to process when you peel that one layer off and you're like, okay, I processed a little bit of that and I feel a little bit better. And then there's another layer, and then there's going to be more processing, more grief. And what I was going through with myself and my kiddos was I was grieving for myself and then I was grieving for them.
Right.
So I
Yes.
take all of those things and I try to paint realistic characters. Like I write a middle school series called the Sarah Craven Mysteries. And at the beginning of the very first book, she is coming home, in air quotes there, to America from Colombia. and she's adopted. And obviously, she already has a huge backstory of trauma by living in an orphanage and then showing up in America, being with weirdos who are different, smell different, eat different foods, and because that's what my kids went through.
Right.
So that's how I use those. I know I'm gonna I'll just keep talking and talking. You'll be like, 10 hours later, Kathleen is still talking.
And one thing I have found in my own journey, and this is an encouragement, is that you find a coping mechanism and you use this for a while, but eventually you heal past that. So it's not
Hmm.
like you're going to have,
Right.
10 million coping mechanisms you have to hold on to for the rest of your life. You can heal past that and be able to let some of those go as you grow stronger. You can start taking down some of those walls that you built for protection and start letting some people in and start expanding your world and growing as you heal. It's not going to be isolated and confined by all these safety mechanisms forever because you can heal and move beyond that.
Right. And I think that one thing that I have found is what became my coping mechanisms were other people's normal. Because if you've heard of like fight, flight, freeze, and
Mhm.
then there's fawn,
Right.
is the new one they've added, like the people pleasing. I was so stuck in that people pleasing that when I started saying, okay, this is my schedule, this is how I'm going to control my little world and do those things as a coping mechanism for me, and then someone would reach out to me and say, can you do this day? Or can you volunteer for this? And I would say, no, I can't because that's not on my schedule. I found out that other people did that regularly and normally they had those boundaries up. So I'm like, this is my new little coping mechanism. And everybody else is like, no, that's my normal. That's what I do on a
Yeah.
normal basis. So sometimes you find that out.
Hmm.
And you just keep doing those things because you need to.
Yes. So another thing I often talk about to my people, and I've experienced in my own life, is how God uses our pain. He doesn't waste our pain.
Yes.
I think that is so beautiful because sometimes you're in the middle of it. You're like, why am I doing this? I don't understand this. Why am I being broken like this? And that was a real struggle for me. So I'm like, I was doing pretty good before. I didn't have to go through all of this. Um, but God had a reason for it and a purpose behind allowing that to happen and using that in the future and whatever so that I can become a help to other people behind me. And there's a whole nother story with that, which I'm not going to get distracted with that. But for you, you've used this to help inform your writing. And so how do you feel like that has been a benefit and helps you stand out from other authors by being able to channel some of that trauma into the calling that God has given you?
Well, I'm going to go a little bit back in my story. I used to have, I used to do trauma-informed workshops in schools for CASA workers
Hmm.
and everything like that. And I felt like it kind of, God started, was definitely using it then, but he was preparing me for using it in my writing then
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
I was the only one. I really felt like an imposter because I'd show up at these events and people would get up and their PhD, LMNOQ, and I'm like, I'm Kathleen Guire. I'm a mom. I have 7 kids, and I'm going to talk to you about what you can do when your classroom explodes in trauma responses. And so, but I had lived it.
Hmm.
And that's what made it different. And teachers and parents and people would come up to me after a workshop and say, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And I would hear other people, and not to put anyone down, but people who had a lot of letters behind their names drone on with statistics and facts, which were true. They were
Hmm.
true facts and true statistics, but they hadn't lived any of it. They had gotten these things out of a textbook. So that's what makes me different as a writer is
Right.
I have lived these things. I had early childhood trauma. And like you were saying, God uses our past. He
Yes.
uses the pain and he had a purpose for that. And in the my season of raising kiddos, that God said, "Okay, you went through all this childhood trauma And now you adopted these kids who had childhood trauma. So this is going to make you more empathetic. And the same with my writing. When I'm writing a book and I'm creating a character, I have already experienced all of that. So
Hmm.
that makes me an expert on my own life. And it also makes me an expert on creating a story arc with hope and healing because I've had it myself.
Yeah, that is so beautiful because God can turn that into a purpose. He has a
Yeah.
reason why He's allowed you to go through that and can help us to help others behind us that have been there. And there's nothing like having hurt yourself, regardless of what the pain is. You can pick it up in someone else. If you've been through it, when you're talking to someone else, like, no, they didn't go through this whole stressful time that I went through in Kuwait, but they have experienced pain and you can feel that. It increases your empathy and
Right.
it increases your ability to reach out and minister to them and to touch their lives and to point them to Christ or whatever that may be and giving them the tools that they need to be able to work through that because you felt it. You know what
Right.
that's like. You know, like,
Yes.
I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, didn't really want it, but I got
Yes.
it. So,
Right.
yes.
Right.
So the next thing I want to wrap up with this question as we come to a close here, but for Christian writers who are listening today, and I do have some of them in the audience, how can they use their difficult past to influence either their writing or some other whatever God has called them to that they may feel disqualified for, or the imposter syndrome, what we were talking about off mic earlier? How do they overcome that, knowing that God has prepared them with the pain that they've been through?
Okay. Since you said that we could be Christian on here,
Oh,
I'm going to
absolutely.
go to Ephesians 1 and I'm going to tell you to read Ephesians 1, but it says there that God chose you. He actually picked you out before the foundation of the world. Before he even thought of the world, he already picked you out because it was his kind intent. And in Ephesians 2:10, which I'm greatly paraphrasing here, that he has prepared a path for you.
Yeah,
He's prepared
absolutely.
a path for you. He's prearranged. I love it in the Amplified because if you can read Ephesians 2:10 in the Amplified, it goes on and on about he's prepared, he's prearranged, he's made the path clear for you. And guess what? Trauma does not discount your purpose. It actually enhances your purpose because
I
if
agree.
you read all the way through the Old Testament, you got character, trauma, 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 victory, character, trauma, 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 victory, trauma, victory, trauma. So
Yes.
God is going to use the pain that you've gone through, and He is going to use that to help other people to glorify Him, to draw people back to Him, because that's what we want. We want, and if you're a writer, what you want to do is you want to meet your reader where they are, come alongside them. And yes, you can do this in fiction too, and say, I know what you're going through this main character. I know what you're dealing with. And here's how this character healed. Here's the story arc in this series. Or if you're not a writer, you do that through whatever you're doing, encouraging people, counseling in air quotes people, helping people along the way who are further behind on their journey because everybody has experienced some form of trauma, whether
Mhm.
it's a big T trauma or the little T trauma of paper cut traumas constantly in your workplace or on your, whatever you're going through. Everybody has, and everybody needs
Right.
encouragement. So whenever you say, did it discount you? No, it made you more valuable. You're more valuable now than you were before the trauma.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. God uses those times to prepare us and refine us. I think often of Moses, and he spent 40 years in Pharaoh's court learning all about government and how it's run. And then God took him 40 years in the desert and humbled him down and taught him how to survive in the desert. And then he went and rescued the people
Right,
and set up the
exactly.
government of Israel and guided them through the wilderness. So obviously with God's help and the guide and all of that, but God prepared him ahead of time, bringing him to that point. All right, so we're
Right.
going to wrap it up here today before we run out of time.
Okay.
And I want to give you just a couple minutes to let the people know where they can find you and what your mission is in your podcast, and if they want to reach out and be able to connect with you on that.
Okay, I have a website, KathleenGuireAuthor.com, and everything's on the website. My podcast, Novel Writing for Christians. And the goal of my podcast is to help you write your book from start to finish. And you can find all my books on my website as well.
Thank you very much. And I actually found one of them on audible.com. I bought it and I haven't got it listened to yet. But I'm really looking forward to it because I'm a huge fan of cozy mysteries. So we're going to have some fun with that one. And I have really enjoyed this time with you, Kathleen. I feel like I've made a new friend and really looking forward to collaborating with you again in the future. And we're going to have some fun. So I'm sure my audience will enjoy this. I'll direct them to you if they reach out. And this has been a blessing to me. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
If you're interested in reading some of Kathleen's books or connecting with her to learn how to write your own story, her website and podcast are linked in the show notes below, so be sure to check those out. Hey, my friend, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with someone you know who may be struggling with depression and anxiety? Also, would you please leave a quick review for the show? Knowing how this podcast is helping you fills my heart with so much joy, and it motivates me for future episodes. For now, it's time for Sam and I to head outside to enjoy some sunshine and fresh air. We'll see you back here on Tuesdays and Thursdays for more great episodes.